Trying to work your way out of poverty can be tough, but sometimes government programs designed to help can actually make it harder.
I had another job, and it was one that was lower pay because I wanted those benefits. I wanted to be able to keep those so that I could keep that stability for my household.
On this episode, we hear from somebody who knows what it's like to earn more money at work and actually end up worse off because of the benefits cliff. You're listening to Defending Ideas. Defending Ideas is a weekly podcast produced by Sutherland Institute. On this show, we are committed to renewing the principles of common sense conservatism, making you a better champion of sound ideas. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Defending Ideas. I'm your host, Nick Dunn, and this week we're talking about poverty, and specifically what it's like to try and balance receiving government programs and trying to work and move toward self-sufficiency. Our guests this week are Chris Robinson, who's someone who has experienced living in poverty and receiving government assistance, and also Michelle Crawford, who's the executive director of Circles Salt Lake, a local nonprofit that works to help people get out of poverty and move towards self-sufficiency. So, Chris and Michelle, thank you so much for joining us on Defending Ideas.
Thank you for having us, Nick.
So what I want to be able to do, we've talked previously on this show about the issue of the benefits cliff and how sometimes if somebody increases the income they earn, that can have a disproportionately negative effect on the benefits they receive and can sometimes act as kind of a disincentive for getting out of poverty. But the purpose of our conversation this week is to really talk about kind of the human angle. You know, what is it actually like for somebody experiencing that? And what does it take to get out of that? And so Chris, with your story as someone who's lived that and who's now kind of been able to escape a situation of feeling disincentivized by government programs, we want to kind of just hear your story. And Michelle will also talk about some of the work that Circles does to help folks do this. So Chris, if we can start there, kind of give us just the short overview of your experience. What programs were you receiving? What was it like? How did you come to be in that circumstance? Maybe let's start there.
I left a domestic violence situation 11 years ago. And with that, I have 2 special needs children. One very, very medically fragile. So when I left, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I didn't know how it was going to work out. And I'm so grateful for the assistance that I was out there. We lived in a domestic violence shelter for a while, transitioned into transitional housing, and then eventually out into the community and had housing. The assistance I had was Medicaid, food stamps, housing. So kind of basically all of our basic needs at that point in time were relied on from someone else. 6 years ago, I lost my son. And just when I felt like I was like, I can do this, I can get out, I felt like the carpet always got pulled out from underneath me. And so after he passed away, I had started to go to work. And at the time I was working at Desert Industries as an associate there. And I made $20 too much. And it was fall time. It was his birthday month. And he'd only been gone for 6 months at that point in time. And they cut my benefits, which meant they cut my antidepressants. And from that $20, it cost me $600 for meds. So it became a thing like, I'm not going to work because I need this to survive, to be able to function for my daughter, to be able to not just curl up in bed and...
There's something that you're articulating that I want to make sure we sort of reinforce for our listeners. And You mentioned some of the benefit or the stability that came from these programs. And when we talk about the acknowledgement of sometimes there's a disincentive, or sometimes, the drop in benefits can be so severe based on a small earning increase, as you mentioned, that the goal is not to sort of just bash these programs. They do a lot of good for a lot of people, providing stability.
Oh, they were a huge part of how we survived. We wouldn't have been able to. My son alone, he had 15 doctors and specialists that he was seeing on a regular basis. And then you put in therapists and all the other things. And then my daughter as well, and her needs to be met. There's no way I could have done it as a single mom, just coming out of a pretty horrid situation.
And I think a situation where you were a stay-at-home mom,
Yeah.
right? So you weren't working at all. And
I
then
wasn't.
I think it's important to note that $20 wasn't $20 more an hour.
No, it was just $20.
One pay period. Because
Yeah.
she picked up some extra hours to help out at work.
And $20 was all it took, and instant cut.
Did you have any degree of awareness when did you know that you were going to get $20 additional on your paycheck? And did you have any sense of what that would do to the
I had no
benefit?
idea at the time, because I was just like, well, I'll stay and work these couple extra hours because it's money in my pocket to help. But I didn't have any idea at the time how it uprooted my whole life. Like, yeah.
Was that something that just happened once or on one program, or is this something that you've experienced a number of times as far as the
I think that
earnings
kind
issue?
of made me more aware to be careful with what I was doing, and kind of checking out things before I did things, because I didn't want to lose that stability and not be able to sustain what we needed.
That's the other thing, that in these kind of conversations, on the one hand, it can become easy to sometimes be critical of government programs, but we have to acknowledge the good that they can do and the stability they can provide. And also, we don't want folks to sort of instantly become critical of the recipients of programs. It'd be easy to say, well, why don't they just understand that if they just kind of hunker down and take a job and, yes, lose some benefits, but the disruption that it causes right then can feel pretty intense and can feel like a disincentive. I wonder if you can tell us what it feels like to sort of see, this idea of, well, if I earn more, it actually may harm me in the short run. What does that feel like?
So I went back to DI and become an associate again, and then was given another opportunity at DI. And I had a really good boss, and he finally came out to me and said one day, "Are you going to be a cashier forever? Is that your goal?" I was like, "No." And he's like, "Let's go talk about this in my office." And he's like, "I know that you're going to lose your Medicaid, but this is what we can give you." It was health insurance, because my daughter at the time was in a day treatment program and suffering from some things that she needed additional help with. And that was the fear of losing that benefit and not being able to help provide for my daughter and her emotional health and mental health needs.
So you're looking at this through the lens of, I need to be able to provide for my family and make sure they have the stability and access to the things they need. And so it really is a rational decision, right? To say, well, if my earnings increase above a certain threshold where I will lose some critical benefits, you're looking at, well, I need to make sure I create a stable environment for my family right now.
Right. Because it had been such chaos that we had been living in for a while. So my goal was to give my kids that stability, to make sure that their needs were met, and to help them so that they could be, ultimately my goal is that they could be productive members of society.
Michelle, in your work with Circle Salt Lake, and I wonder if maybe you could give just first a quick overview of what that organization is and the work it does, but then also give us a sense of this issue, the folks that you work with through Circles, and Chris, you're actually a graduate of the Circles program, and which I'd love to talk to our listeners about kind of how that works and what it takes to do that. But give us a sense of the important work that Circles does and how often, Michelle, you see this issue popping up in the folks that you work with.
So Circles is an organization with a focus on poverty alleviation. So I love that you talk about the government benefits, because we absolutely do appreciate all of those benefits that are available. For us, that's a way for us to support the families that we serve in managing their situation of poverty, with the ultimate goal of breaking free of those services. And so certainly with the cliff effect that we're talking about, that's a very significant concern. And so for us, we have this struggle of celebrating opportunity with this overbearing fear of, hold on, before you accept that new job or that promotion, how is that going to impact the benefits that you're receiving? And not because anybody wants to or likes to live off of those benefits, but because they know, like in Chris's example, if I make a small increase, in her case, it was $20 more in one paycheck, and she lost over $500 monthly in medical benefits. So that does keep you back. And so for us, it's a big challenge and the math is not easy. So to, just call up a service provider and say, this is what I've been offered. Am I going to be okay? I mean, it's complicated. It's a very complicated calculation.
That's just something that if nobody's ever experienced, I think they should have to make that phone call, because it's not easy. There's not very many people that can give you that exact dollar amount. And you wait on hold and you get transferred and transferred. It's not an easy process.
We have to go take a quick break, but before we do, I just want to pinpoint something there as well, that kind of what you said, Michelle, from your perspective with Circles Salt Lake and your perspective experiencing it, Chris, that the folks who are receiving these programs, by and large, they don't want to stay on them. There's a pretty universal desire to progress, to earn more income, and to become self-sufficient. So there's not like, okay, how can I figure out how to stay on these programs? Because this is pretty great. This is helpful for now, but I want to progress. Can you give just a quick word on, is that fair to say that that's kind of the attitude?
It is at Circles. So I can definitely speak to the families that we serve at Circles. The families who commit to our program have committed to putting in the work. It's not short term. It's a minimum 18-month commitment they make to be a part of Circles. And that's what they've come for. That's what they want. And I have been asked the question from people who haven't experienced poverty or maybe have never walked along the path of somebody trying to escape poverty on, is it really hard to support your clients because do they want to make a change? And I actually love that question, because I get to let them know that yes, because it's not fun. It doesn't feel good to be on government benefits. It doesn't feel good to be reliant on someone else. And so I would say the majority of people who are experiencing poverty, they don't love that experience. They don't want it forever.
Chris, what did it feel like for you, I guess? How did you feel like you were motivated to be able to progress, increase your income such that you didn't need those programs anymore?
I think it was a big self-esteem boost for me to be able to know that I don't need those anymore, that they can go to someone else that deserves that chance, that handout or hand up to get to a better life.
Well, I want to talk more about kind of your journey and that kind of got you to where you are now, and especially the graduation from Circles, because it's a program I've been able to come and see firsthand, and I've always been impressed with what you all do to sort of rally around people and help them have that achievement that you're talking about. So let's dive into that when we come back. You're listening to Defending Ideas. We'll be right back.
Sutherland Institute is an independent, nonprofit public policy think tank based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Our mission is to defend the principles of the American founding and strengthen the institutions of civil society essential for those principles to endure. Sutherland provides research, events, and multimedia to policymakers and the public to promote the principles of faith, family, freedom, opportunity, and responsibility. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back to Defending Ideas. Before we continue our discussion about poverty and upward mobility and what it takes for somebody to overcome the benefits cliff and move towards self-sufficiency, I want to mention, if you like what you're hearing today, please visit us at defendingideas.org. You can find short clips from this conversation as well as past episodes that you can use in your conversations with friends and family and on social media. You can also subscribe to this podcast on Google, Apple, Spotify, any of the major platforms, wherever you like to get your shows. That's defendingideas.org. So I want to continue our conversation and Michelle and Chris talking about essentially what it takes to sort of overcome the benefit cliff, this cliff effect, and maybe start, Chris, with asking about a recent promotion that you had, going from part-time to full-time. Walk us through what that experience was like, what it meant for you and kind of your household stability, and what it took to be able to navigate that successfully.
I think that was a huge worry for me because of the medical insurance. And like I said before, my boss, we sat down and we negotiated some things and talked about, this is what it looks like and this is what you would be banking. Let's look at that. And one of them was health insurance that I needed. And so that I knew that when that Medicaid stopped, my daughter still had coverage that was equivalent to what, or better than what she already had.
So can I ask you, when you first were offered that, said, hey, you've been at part-time, we want to move you to full-time, what was kind of your first reaction?
I turned it down several times, and it wasn't until my boss came out on the floor, the store manager, and said, are you going to do this forever? And I don't know. I'm grateful for him, his honesty to come out and say that to me, because it really did make me think, well, I don't want to be in this forever. I don't want to be in this situation forever. I want better, but this is the thing that's holding me back. And I've lived it. I know how that $20 cut me off before, and I didn't want that to happen again.
So you had felt in the past the realization of, well, if my income increases, I'm going to lose all of the stability that's been important for my family. And you're essentially worried of that happening again, moving part-time to full-time?
Mm-hmm. Even when before that, I went back to DI again, I had another job, and it was one that was lower pay because I wanted those benefits. I wanted to be able to keep those so that I could keep that stability for my household. So luckily, I've had really great opportunities and really great places to work that have been kind of a building block up to get better momentum to move forward.
Michelle, one of the things you all do at Circles is, the way I like to describe it is you kind of build a network of social capital around people to help them be able to navigate these kinds of things. Talk about things like this, the experiences where folks are offered things or they're trying to navigate work. What have you seen as important conversations, and what's helpful for folks that maybe our listeners may not realize sometimes can be challenging for folks trying to escape poverty?
Yeah. I love talking about this part of Chris's story because I got to be a part of it. So at Circles, we match our program participants, who we call Circle leaders, because they're leading their journey out of poverty. We match them with community volunteers who are middle or wealthy class income to build that social capital, to build a bridge between these income classes. And shortly after Chris was given this offer of a promotion from part-time to full-time and even a supervisory role, her ally wasn't able to meet with us that week. We meet with our families every week. And so Chris came to me and said, do you want to be my ally tonight? And I was excited because I'd volunteered for Circles as an ally before moving over to my position currently. And I thought, sure, yeah, what's going on with you? And when she let me know about this, she was panicked. She said, I just got this great opportunity and I don't think I can take it. And so when I asked her why, she let me know, I've experienced the benefits cliff before. I can't fall back and lose the benefits that I have because my family really needs this medical coverage. And so I said, okay, well, let's talk about this, right? If you're going part-time to full-time, how much are they offering? What benefits come with your compensation package? Chris didn't know the answers to those questions because she hadn't even asked past experience had her immediately assume that this was not going to be a good thing for her. And she was terrified of it. So we got to write it out. How much do you need to make to be able to lose these benefits? And it doesn't mean you now have to pay out of pocket. So you work for a pretty large corporation. You need to ask them what they're offering. So will this part-time to full-time come with employer provided benefits? And will you have paid time off, because we know you need flexibility with being a single mom and having a daughter in school and with medical needs. And that was really quite exciting, because I got to have a conversation with Chris about just negotiating her value, about knowing her worth, something that most people in poverty have never learned or had somebody remind them of. And instead of asking those questions, it comes from a place of worth. If you're going to ask your employer, what comes with this offer, right? Most people in poverty don't think of that. They think that they're receiving this great gift without realizing that they're being offered that because they've shown their value at work, and that an employer has seen that and wants to offer them something more and have it be more of a partnership in their employment.
There's a story that this is reminding me of from the book The Conservative Heart by Arthur Brooks, who he's talked a lot about poverty in his work over the years. And he references a story of a man who, when asked, okay, what it's like, you're working, you're doing better financially now, how does that feel? And the man pulls out an iPhone. And Arthur Brooks in the book says, you would expect that he was going to say, oh, I can afford to buy this new cool thing now. But what he did, he pulled up an email from his boss saying, hey, we have an important project. It's on a deadline. I need you to do it. And he said, I'm needed. It kind of gets into that self-worth thing that not everyone has felt. And that's, we talk a lot in a lot of policy circles about the dignity of work. And I think that's what people mean, is that they're being needed and being valued. And in this case, having that being able to be reflected in, an income and a benefits package that matches what you're going for. All of those things are kind of wrapped up into this idea of what does it take to help somebody move up and escape from poverty. And I want to kind of pinpoint, because from this experience, Chris, what you were saying is that am I right in kind of assuming you were ready to say no to this? Normally saying,
yeah, hey, she can attest to that. I was like, I can't, and I had my list.
And normally, normal folks would think, okay, if you're at part-time and you're offered full-time, that might be viewed as, well, of course that's a good thing. But because of your past experience, and there were specific instances, right, where you were offered raises, but how did you react to those in the past when you were worried about, is this going to cut me off from benefits? Maybe just tell us a brief experience or two from your past history made you worried about accepting this.
I think my biggest was knowing that I would lose that, and that I had before. And I think having that circle of people, that social circle, to be able to support me and say, no, you're worth these things. You have this talent. You are a hard worker. You do these things. You show up. So being able to have that self-worth, be able to point out and say, hey, and where I could go in and talk, this is my concern. If I go from part-time to full-time, I lose these benefits. And it wasn't that I wasn't working full-time anyway, because I was working 2 jobs. But instead of working the 2 jobs, going to 1. And to be able to manage that and to be able to meet my daughter's needs and my own needs on my own.
Well, we need to take another quick break, but when we come back, I want to get into, we've mentioned before, you're a graduate of the Circles program, talk about what you're doing now, and maybe kind of talk about what's next on this issue, and perhaps most importantly, what do our listeners need to walk away from remembering about the reality of people right here in Utah working hard to try and escape poverty? What are some of the obstacles that they're facing, and just how we as citizens should be thinking about it, so that we remember, even though in Utah we have all kinds of accolades, we have a great economy, a strong job growth, there are a number of metrics in aggregate showing Utah is doing really well, which is great, and we should champion that and be happy for it. But there are still pockets of people kind of stuck in chronic poverty that are are deserving of the kind of experience you're articulating. This idea of I'm recognized for my work, my self-worth, and they have a lot to offer to this wonderful state. So I want to get into some of that and kind of round out our conversation for our listeners in that way. So we'll be right back talking about poverty and upward mobility here on Defending Ideas.
For a deeper dive into the issues you care about, read Sutherland Institute's official blog, Insights and Takeaways. You'll gain deep insights from policy experts and relevant takeaways voters need to know. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back to Defending Ideas. I'm your host, Nick Dunn, and this week we've been talking about poverty and upward mobility and what it's like to actually experience receiving government programs and trying to work your way up out of poverty and some of the obstacles people face in that circumstance. Before we go back to that conversation, I want to mention, if you like what you're hearing right now, please visit us at defendingideas.org. You can find short clips from this conversation and previous episodes that you can use on social media and in your conversation with friends and family. You can also subscribe to the podcast on any of the major platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, and others, wherever you like to get your shows. That's defendingideas.org. So, Michelle and Chris, I want to sort of give our listeners, we always try and sort of end these episodes with some optimism, what's next on the issue. And with your experience, Chris, there is hopefulness and optimism because of where you are now. And so I want to maybe start with that. Just tell us kind of where you are now, what you're doing, and how does it feel to be in the circumstance you're in now compared to before?
Well, I just accepted a new position at Utah Community Action, so I'm helping people with the HEAT program that I myself benefited from, but I'm helping people out there to be able to meet their needs and to give them referrals for things that they may need. So, but I've also been able to go from a circle leader to an ally and be able to give back to those that help me.
Michelle, can you tell us just again what's the difference between a circle leader and an ally? What does it mean to be an ally?
So circle leader is a program participant. So that's somebody that's participating in circles and called a circle leader because we want them to take leadership of their life, of their journey, of their goals that they're trying to obtain and what life looks like for them outside of poverty. An ally is a volunteer. So somebody really who's just committing to being a friend, not a mentor, not a case manager, somebody who is not in poverty. So somebody could have experienced poverty before or maybe never even known or seen what poverty looks like. So somebody in middle or wealthy class income that commits to being a friend to a circle leader. So somebody that would help give that coaching like I gave to Chris on negotiating for herself with the opportunity to receive a promotion, or really just somebody who might cheer them on, cheer on their circle leader while they're tackling these big obstacles and the big goals that they've made, and somebody that just gives them that vision into a world that somebody in poverty has never experienced before.
So Chris, your circumstance now, because you're working full time, you're earning enough to where you're not on government programs anymore. How does it feel to have kind of that degree of financial stability through your work, through you're earning this success? Articulate what it feels like to have gotten there, given your experience.
It's been a huge blessing. Like, we can do more. My daughter and I can take that vacation and not be like scraping every little penny trying to make that work. Yeah. So just a really better place.
I want to know, what does it feel like to volunteer? Because volunteering, we realize, really is a privilege. Most people in poverty, if they're going to be giving of themselves, it's usually to a job, to earn income, to support their family. So what does it feel like to be to have this volunteer commitment now?
I don't know. To me, it's rewarding because I've seen my circle leader that I have, that the progress that she's making, working towards those goals, and being able to say, hey, how did that go? What can I help you with? Give that back, I think.
Is there something special about the ability to empathize with people, to say that I've been where you are, I know what you're going through?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, that's why I do the thing. That's why I chose to go to a nonprofit and to work for them, is because I want to help people get out of those situations and know that they can do it and be successful.
So as we start to round out our conversation for this episode, I want to leave our listeners with kind of some things that they should remember about this issue, and for the many people who are still, working and striving to get out of poverty and move past government programs, get to that level of self-sufficiency that you talked about, Chris. What are some important things that we need to remember about folks who are still trying to get out, who are still maybe facing? Does it feel like there's a disincentive? Is it almost like a treadmill where if I earn more, I lose benefits? I guess how prevalent do you think the feeling of being stuck is? People who are trying their best, who are working hard, they don't want to remain in government programs, but they almost feel stuck, like there's no way out. Maybe Michelle, from your vantage point, and then Chris, from your experience, what's something we need to remember about the experience people have, what it feels like when they're still in that circumstance?
Well, I think for anyone who has never experienced poverty or walked alongside somebody who has experienced poverty, then it's really hard to understand, and it might even just sound unrealistic that poverty can be a trap. So just like Chris's example of multiple opportunities to earn more income, that at first she took one and was excited, thinking that. And we shouldn't also, not give attention to the situation that she was in when she was deciding to go to work. I mean, she was doing what I think a lot of us would love to do as a stay-home mom, right, with a full-time earning partner. And domestic violence is a whole nother topic for a different conversation. But, so she was in that situation and looking to, get on her feet and support her family. And then did fall into this trap because being excited about a couple of extra hours on a paycheck then resulted in the loss of these medical benefits. And it wasn't a full-time thing. It was a temporary. She just helped out her employer for a couple extra hours with no idea that was going to be the result. And then from that, for the next probably, I want to say 6 or 7 years, she always turned down opportunities for increased income because that one experience let her know that wasn't going to work for her. And then, so you are trapped. You because you try once a little bit, take that step forward, and you fall off that cliff. So I think that's just something for people to know, is that there are circumstances that put people in poverty, and
That feels, so we can remember that other people are still experiencing that.
Well, I think that people, I don't know, I was appreciative of the help, but that's all I could see my future being was on these benefits for the rest of my life and my kids' life, and not seeing beyond that. And I think that's where circles helped me realize that there was more to it. I don't know. I've told Michelle before that I think circles made the impossible possible.
Well, we're almost done with our time, and I have to mention that just because my interaction with Michelle and the Circles programs over the years in some different capacities, it's no surprise to me the impact that it can have on you and on others. There's one thing I want to pinpoint, is that there's such an important role on this issue for our free enterprise system generally, but employers, because with your story, Chris, it was an employer who said, hey, you are needed here. And that's something that I think when we talk about poverty issues, there's often there's often a trend when discussing poverty to sort of say, well, how can we arrange resources to push to people in poverty to help them? And there's not enough discussion around how can we remind them they are needed, they are valued, and they have something really incredible to offer in society. And how do we make that happen? And so that's what I love about Circles does that. And Chris, you're living proof of that. And I also want to thank both of you, and especially you, Chris, just because the things that you've experienced, being able to talk about that, of course, can be challenging at times. And it's so helpful, I think, for all of us to understand the reality of what people go through, so that we can try and have better empathy towards each other, and which is probably something just in general in our country we need more of right now. But then to motivate us to understand issues that we can work toward addressing. And so I want to thank both of you and ask if there's anything else that you would suggest that is very important for our listeners to remember about this issue, as we're moving forward, having these kinds of conversations. What do our folks just need to remember about the benefit cliff?
I think one of the biggest things for me was to know, to not have it be such a dive off of the cliff, to have it gradually come down, so that you're kind of meeting those same goals, but it's not such an immediate thing. Because you may have health insurance, but that's going to cost you this much each month, where it wasn't costing something before, so that you can kind of have that time to build up to that.
Michelle, anything we're missing? What do our listeners just need to remember from this conversation as they think about poverty and upward mobility here in Utah?
Well, I think something that I learned that was really surprising when I came into work for a Circles chapter versus volunteering is that most people in poverty have 0 to 2 people that they can call on in a time of need. So when you think about why are these people staying in poverty, or if you do only have experience with maybe the stereotype that people in poverty are lazy, just know that most people don't have somebody outside of a very small circle, if at all, that can help them, 1, see their value, or 2, even know how to negotiate some of these really significant challenges that keep people in poverty.
I think the last question I want to ask is, because we're talking about this in the context of upward mobility, and the ability to achieve upward mobility is kind of a core principle of America. It's sort of embedded into what it means to be in this country, the land of opportunity. And here in Utah as well, we talked before about some of the accolades we get economically, that this is a state of really high upward mobility. And it seems that the government programs we have designed to help, that do a tremendous amount of good for many, many people, at the very least should not disincentivize upward mobility. That we will and can have debates about the best way to fix various problems when it comes to public assistance programs and poverty. But is that a core principle that we should be able to agree on, that at the very least, upward mobility should feel attainable for people trying to escape poverty, and programs should not make it feel harder to do so?
Absolutely. I think that we probably know that a lot of systems are very antiquated. So if we could look at things again under a different lens, and I'm all for putting in the work, and so are our circle leaders. So if it means that I'm reporting so often, or I, agree or make a commitment to what I'll put in, and this gradual climb I'll make while I have a safety net, or, for every number of additional earnings I make, then the loss of benefits is a gradual, and there could be, a formula there that I think would keep people on that upward trajectory, than having them just put their hands up and say, I can't do it.
Because like I was saying, I attended a training this last week where for every $1 someone in poverty gets, they are cut $12 in benefits. So that needs to kind of be
Go the other way,
so that people are being able to get there and feel like they can dig themselves out of that.
Well, Chris Robinson and Michelle Crawford, thank you so much for talking through this, sharing your expertise and your experience, and thanks for the courage to talk about things that are difficult, because makes an impact. It helps the rest of us understand the importance of these issues. So thank you both very much for lending your time and experience and expertise here on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we have one more quick break before we leave you with some final talking points. This is Defending Ideas. We'll be right back.
Sometimes it's hard to keep up with the latest policy debate that affects your life. The solution? Subscribe to Sutherland Institute's weekly newsletter, where you'll find in-depth insights from seasoned policy experts, compelling multimedia, and advance notice of special events. Visit sutherlandinstitute.org.
Welcome back to Defending Ideas. Before we go, just a few final thoughts. First, I want to thank again our special guests, Michelle Crawford and Chris Robinson, for sharing their experiences and their expertise about this issue. And especially want to thank Chris for being able to talk about issues that are challenging and tough. It takes a lot of courage to come and do that. So we're very appreciative of them lending their time and expertise and experiences as we learn more about this issue. And I also want to say, if you find yourself in a conversation about upward mobility, the benefits cliff, or just poverty in general, there are a couple of things that you can share in that conversation. Number one, remember that public policy impacts real people in real ways every day. So these conversations, they're not just academic or hypothetical about policy issues. They're real because they're affecting our fellow Utahns and our fellow Americans, and we care about them and want them to be able to prosper. So the issues are real. We need to remember the real impact they have on our fellow Utahns and Americans. And also, remember to articulate that upward mobility is a core principle that we should all be able to rally around and support. And at the very least, we should expect that our government programs shouldn't act as a barrier or an obstacle to those striving for upward mobility. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and that you feel better equipped to defend some of the ideas we talked about today. If you liked what you heard, please visit us at defendingideas.org. You can subscribe to the show on Apple or Google or Spotify, any of the major platforms. You can also find short clips that you can reshare on social media. You can also watch on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And lastly, if you want to support the work of Sutherland Institute, please visit sutherlandinstitute.org/donate. Thank you again for joining us on Defending Ideas from the Sutherland Institute in Salt Lake City. I'm Nick Dunn. We'll see you next time.